Adam Johnson of Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting broke down the abject failure of the debate questions and the debate moderators this election cycle. So let me tell you where there was a focus and what was left out in terms of questions to the candidates. So the national debt in these three debates, the national debt got 3 questions. Okay, now don't get me wrong. It's not like the national debt isn't an issue. Of course you could talk about that. But is it worth 3 questions in 3 debates when we'll get to in a second the things that were left out? I don't think so. And furthermore, there's never the alternative perspective brought up on the national debt. Like, it's always brought up in a fear-mongering, deficit-hawkish kind of way, and very few people say something that's true about it, which is, hey, did you know that the lifeblood of capitalism is debt? Like you, for example, when you go get a car, you got to take out a loan, you got to take out a mortgage on your house, just some people finance couches, TVs, whatever. Yeah, that's the lifeblood of capitalism. Furthermore, just to talk about the raw number for the debt doesn't make much sense. You have to look at it as debt to GDP ratio. And when you look at it like that, this idea of like, oh my God, we have $17 trillion in debt, that's not as crazy as it sounds when you look at the debt to GDP ratio and you actually understand the economy. So again, don't listen to me on this. I'm not an economist, but there are MMT economists who speak about this. Speak to your run-of-the-mill Keynesians will tell you about the national debt and how there's a lot of fear-mongering over it, and people don't really know what they're talking about when they fear-monger over it. So, but either way, you could still ask a question on it. You could still even frame it from a perspective of, hey, wouldn't it be nice to cut it? But 3 questions in 3 debates. ISIS, 5 questions. Okay, that's an issue, obviously. ISIS, worse than Al-Qaeda, disastrous. They hold territory in the Middle East. They're getting their ass handed to them on a silver platter right now. But, yeah, it's a real question. How much does that affect a single mother in Wyoming trying to feed her 2 kids? Not as much as perhaps they would lead on here, but okay, it's a real issue. Maybe reel it back in, 3 questions maybe, but no, 5, fine. Russia, 7 questions about Russia. Okay, no. No, not with you on that. Yeah, you could say what Vladimir Putin did in Crimea was bad. He jacked Crimea. Go talk to a voter in Kentucky and ask them if they even know what Crimea is. They'll think it's something you're supposed to put in your coffee. They're also asking about Russia in the context of Syria. Okay, there's an issue there, but that's more about the geopolitical imperialist chessboard than anything that directly affects the American people. And it's always framed from a more hawkish perspective of like, aren't they bad? Huh? Do we all agree that Russia sucks? Huh? It's just so goofy and so silly, and 7 questions in 3 debates. All right, so now what wasn't discussed? Privacy. So the NSA, 0 questions. The LGBT community, 0 questions. Drug policy, 0 questions. Student debt. We have a student debt crisis, 0 questions. Climate change, 0 questions. Poverty, 0 questions. Campaign finance reform, 0 questions. Every single one of the moderators who hosted these debates should be ashamed of themselves. They committed journalistic malpractice, and they're terrible at their jobs. Okay, these deserve a lot of discussion, a lot of them. We have an NSA that is collecting metadata on everybody. They're spying on everybody. Remember that giant fucking facility they're building in, I think it's Utah? Multi-billion-dollar facility where they're collecting everybody's records? You would think maybe that there'd be a moderator who says, hey, what are your guys' thoughts on us making Orwell come to life? What are your thoughts on that? Maybe you want to put it in reverse, want to discuss it a little bit? Nope, nothing on that. The LGBT community, whatever, you got gay marriage, so now we're done with it. Even though, in over 20 states, somebody can still be fired because they're gay? That you could be kicked out of a restaurant because you're gay? There are governors fighting right now to put on the law books, codify it, and say, oh, no, yeah, you're allowed to, in the name of religious freedom, you're allowed to fire a gay person, you're allowed to kick them out of your place of business, and we're going to protect you. We're going to protect you, the bigot, as opposed to you, the discriminated against. Okay, no questions on that. Drug policy, it's not like we have an opiate issue going on right now. It's not like the FDA has repeatedly flirted with banning kratom, which, by the way, cures a lot of people who are addicted to pain pills and is a totally benign recreational drug. Nothing to say about that. Fucking student debt, over $1 trillion worth of student debt. You got the millennials who are fucking drowning in it. They can't get their lives started because they owe so much goddamn money. Why talk about things that actually fucking affect people and that makes sense when we can talk Putin, the Kremlin people, the fucking Kremlin. Ooga booga, be scared. And I can't even, the fact that climate change, did you know the last time climate change was asked about? 2008. So even under Romney and Obama, when those debates were happening, no. And you know why that is, right? The Republicans have muddied the waters so effectively. It's a hoax, it's not real, it's not real, it's not real, it's not real, it's not real. That even a simple question about it, they'll say, liberal bias because you believe in facts and you believe in what scientists say. So you gotta fucking fight back against this horseshit, man. They're wrong and they're silly and the rest of the world knows this and they're watching. We just covered the story. It wasn't that long ago. We've surpassed the point of no return on climate change. We're consistently now going to be over 400 parts per million. That's the threshold where they go, oh shit, we're Fucksville, son. The story about how there's going to be another refugee crisis, a worse refugee crisis in the Middle East, because we're talking about a situation where many places in the Middle East are actually uninhabitable. Are you kidding me? That makes Syria look like nothing. Okay, we got a Syrian refugee crisis. How about an entire Middle East refugee crisis because people can't live there because it's too goddamn hot? You would think that this would be brought up. Hey, wars over water. Maybe that'll be an issue. Hey, maybe the spike in food prices that now people can't afford food because the food chain's so messed up because of drought and famine. Maybe, just throw that out there. Hey, by the way, there's a record flooding in Louisiana, and we just had a freak hurricane that makes no sense, and now we have record wildfires in the past 14 months have been the hottest on record. No, but liberal bias, don't ask that question. I can't deal with this shit, man. Poverty, you're going to ask no questions about poverty? Did you know we have hundreds of thousands of homeless people in the United States of America? Did you know to house those homeless people, it actually saves money? Let me repeat that. To house the homeless people, we have hundreds of thousands of them. To house them saves money. You're like, Kyle, hold on now. That doesn't make any sense. What do you mean? No, it makes perfect sense. When they're not housed, when you don't put a roof over their head, you know what happens? Turns out it costs you more money because they have more run-ins with the police, so they end up going to jail. Sometimes they end up going to prison. Sometimes they end up in some sort of mental institution. There's all different ways in the hospital. There's all different ways that it costs you money, the taxpayer, when they're homeless people. If you put a roof over their head in a one-bedroom apartment, bare bones, you don't go crazy. You don't give them a fucking mansion. Don't make it luxury. Don't give them a pool. No, just simple one-bedroom, bare bones, whatever. You put that over their head, all of a sudden, a lot of them get their lives together, but it costs you less money. So what's the downside? Not a question about poverty, not a question about homelessness. We have tens of thousands of homeless veterans in the United States. People who fought for the country, homeless, not a question, not worth the question. But Putin, the Kremlin for fuck's sake, the fucking Kremlin. There was a study we covered a few years ago. They said 76% of the American people are living paycheck to paycheck. Wages have been stagnant since the 1980s for the middle class. People are pissed off, man. Not a question about that. What are you going to do? It's not like that's worthy of being brought up. It's not like this is a debate to lead the country or anything. And, campaign finance being the heart of everything that's wrong in American politics, not only should that get a question, got zero, it should get probably more questions than any other issue. Because, again, anybody who's researched this and knows what they're talking about understands, that's the root of all evil. Because it's the legalized bribery that we have in the system that makes our government so dysfunctional. The most amazing fact to me, and that's why I always bring it up, is you can have the American people vote in an election. They obviously, it's an election. They pick everybody they want. You come back a month later and you do a poll about how they feel about the people they just elected to Congress. They get like a 9% approval rating. 12% max? Ooh, we're peaking. 14% approval rating, people. Geez, if they're, historically popular, 26%. This is unbelievable. How's that possible? How's that possible? You just voted for them. You just picked them. I fucking hate them. But you just picked them, but I hate them. How can that be? Well, we know the answer. We are always picking between the lesser of two evils in our own minds because we know they're not representing us. They're snubbing us, the constituents, the people they're supposed to represent, because it's just a matter of competing special interests. Are the Democrats going to win and serve their donors, or are the Republicans going to win and serve their donors? That's what we have. So, the money is the main issue. This is why you get ExxonMobil gets a $4 billion subsidy every single year, even though they're one of the most profitable corporations in the world. Because they paid their bribes. They bought off their politicians. So they're going to get what they got coming. Wall Street, same thing. You ever stop and think about it? Hey, why is it that like a community bank that goes under in some rural community, they don't get bailed out? Why doesn't the local deli or the dry cleaner get bailed out if there is hard economic times? But they always rush in to bail out Wall Street. Why? Why? Because they paid their bribes. The number one issue facing us, we have a warfare state, the military-industrial complex. I mean, the amount of money we spend on the military is preposterous. But that exists, and nobody questions it in the establishment because they pay their bribes. The defense contractors pay their bribes. The politicians do their bidding. Campaign finance reform is the number one issue. You're never going to fix anything until you fix that. Zero questions. Mainstream media has failed you.